Okay. So the shouts of "Remember the Alamo, remember Goliad," they're starting to fade away now.
Mm-hmm.
And what's left is this kind of silence, shock, exhaustion maybe. The dust is settling over San Jacinto.
18 minutes. That's all it took.
An incredibly short battle, brutal, decisive, Santa Anna himself captured. The war for Texas independence just stops abruptly.
But that moment, that absolute peak of victory, it's really just turning a page, isn't it? It closes one chapter, sure.
But it opens a new one, and it looks like a really difficult one.
Exactly. A revolution, fundamentally, it's about tearing something down, fighting against a power.
Right. Destruction.
But the real test, the long, hard slog, that starts the day after.
Building something new.
Trying to create a nation. Stable, legitimate, sovereign, out of chaos and sheer willpower.
And that's what we're digging into today. For you, the listener, think of this deep dive as answering that big question. What happens after the revolution? We're drawing only from historical accounts, notes from people who were actually there, to trace what happened next. To the new Republic of Texas, of course.
But also to the people, the
Yeah.
key figures, their fates, which were often pretty tragic, honestly.
Yeah. This is the story of that uneasy peace, the staggering cost of the freedom they just won, and all the immediate challenges that really threatened to just rip the new nation apart before it even got started.
So let's unpack this whole journey into nationhood.
Okay, so San Jacinto wins them some breathing room, right, a reprieve.
A temporary one, yeah.
But the new government, they needed legitimacy. Fast. And they needed to establish it, like, yesterday.
But the sources show something else was going on. The internal structure, the revolutionary government itself, it was already fractured, even before the final battle.
It's kind of amazing, isn't it?
The core problem was just deep disunity. You have this provisional government
Right.
kind of cobbled together by the consultation. And immediately, it's plagued by fighting. Inside fighting, there's this massive, really destructive split between the governor, Henry Smith, and the general council.
The level of political infighting right at this critical moment, it's honestly astonishing when you read about it.
It really is.
The records are clear. The council, instead of working with the governor, starts basically taking over his job, usurping authority.
They completely ignored Governor Smith's functions. And, incredibly, they also ignored the commander-in-chief, Sam Houston.
While he's trying to run a war.
Exactly. It's fascinating and maybe a bit depressing how quickly the high ideals of revolution just evaporated into these practical power grabs.
So the council is passing acts claiming it's for the public interest.
Right. But contemporary observers noted what was really going on. They wanted control. Control over land grants, over military appointments, key levers of power.
And this just created chaos internally.
Massive strife.
Governor Smith himself, he used incredibly strong language. He called the council's behavior intriguing, caucusing parties.
Not exactly terms of endearment.
No. When your chief executive is basically accusing the legislature of political cannibalism, well, that tells you everything about the climate of this brand new republic.
And Smith dug at his heels. He refused to submit to what the council demanded. He pointed out that all the key leaders, Houston, Travis Houston, they recognized him, that his authority was legitimate.
So declaring the new Constitution March 17th, 1836, it wasn't just about breaking from Mexico, was it?
Not entirely. It served a dual purpose, really. Yes, formalize the break, absolutely critical.
But also
Try to impose some kind of structure, some discipline on their own internal political mess. The Declaration of Independence was, in a way, also a desperate plea for internal order.
And if you look back just a few months before that, it's clear that this idea of total independence, it wasn't everyone's goal from the start.
That's a crucial point. Often gets glossed over in the legend.
Right. Texans had actually repeatedly declared they were loyal to the Mexican federal system, specifically the Constitution of 1824.
The one that protected states' rights, decentralized power. The system they felt Santa Anna was destroying.
And Stephen F. Austin himself, the father of Texas.
Yeah.
As late as December 1835, he still believed the end goal was reconciliation, staying part of Mexico, but a properly structured federal Mexico.
Which tells you a lot. Many key players saw this, initially at least, as more of a civil war within Mexico. Restore the Constitution. Not necessarily break away entirely.
But that hope for reconciliation, it died fast.
Very fast. Once independence was declared, The whole game changed.
Mexico immediately refused to recognize the outcome of the war. They refused to recognize the new republic born at San Jacinto.
And that non-recognition was absolutely devastating for Texas.
Because Mexico didn't see it as just a local rebellion that fizzled out.
No, they saw it as a hostile invasion that had, for the moment, succeeded. The official view in Mexico City. These American settlers weren't really disgruntled Mexican citizens.
They were
Foreigners who have introduced themselves. That's the language used. And their complaints about rights. Just a smokescreen. A disguised attempt to grab territory and declare independence all along.
And the sources show Santa Anna was already on the move with a huge army before the convention declared independence in March 36.
Right. So Mexico saw Texas as hostile from the get-go. Their refusal to recognize the victory meant the war hadn't really ended, it had just paused.
So this threat, this idea of a massive Mexican army coming back, it just hung over the Republic constantly. Like a storm cloud that never went away.
A permanent thundercloud, yeah.
Yeah.
And this perpetual state of war, even if it wasn't active fighting all the time, forced the Republic to look outwards for help immediately.
Diplomacy basically became another battlefield.
It had to be. Which brings us to that legendary diplomatic trio.
Right. Just weeks after the victory, they appoint Stephen F. Austin, Branch T. Archer, and William H. Wharton commissioners to the United States.
Probably the toughest job in the new republic.
You think?
Absolutely. Imagine it. They needed recognition. They needed loans. They needed military aid. And they had to get it from the U.S., whose official policy was neutrality.
Plus, the travel itself.
Thousands of miles. Difficult conditions. Austin drumming up support in Kentucky and Ohio. Archer appealing to Virginia. Texas was, understandably, very proud of this trio.
They were the Republic's lifeline, weren't they?
Pretty much. They had to tirelessly make the case for Texas sovereignty. To a skeptical American public, and maybe even more importantly, to a cautious U.S. government in Washington.
So this exhausting diplomatic work, it was absolutely essential. Without foreign recognition, Texas wasn't really a country.
Just a rogue territory.
Waiting
for the Mexican army to inevitably return. The victory was won on the battlefield, sure, but the nation's survival. That depended heavily on these three men traveling the states, selling the promise of Texas.
Okay, so diplomatic recognition, that was the shield Texas needed on the world stage.
But the real immediate threat, the thing that could kill the republic from the inside, it was this deep, systemic problem. Financial ruin. It just undercut everything. Stability, trust, basic functions.
So lack of recognition was the big political problem. But the immediate practical problem was simpler. The Republic was broke. I mean, catastrophically broke. No exaggeration.
Bankrupt from the moment it was born. And this weakness, this lack of funds, it plagued them right through their entire existence as a republic.
The sources paint a really bleak picture, don't they?
Stark. Volunteers, the guys who just won the war, couldn't even be fed or clothed properly. Lieutenant Colonel Neal, commanding at Bexar, reported they couldn't survive on paper pledges.
The soldiers did their part. The government just couldn't hold up its end.
And this wasn't just because of the recent fighting. This financial instability, it was systemic. It went way back.
How far back?
We see accounts from 1833. That's before the revolution really kicked off. Troops in Texas hadn't received even the 20th part of their pay. Yeah. It forced massive disbandment. The only reason they kept about 70 men under arms in San Antonio back then.
Why?
Voluntary contributions from the local citizens, who were often poor themselves. The government, even under Mexican rule, had already failed to fund its own military.
So without money, how does a government even operate?
Barely. They had to resort to desperate measures just to keep the lights on, so to speak.
Like what?
Appropriating land, taking over custom house dues for ready cash, issuing certificates, basically IOUs, promises to pay for things they needed. Horses, property pressed into service for the army.
Imagine that. The government takes your horse for the war effort.
And gives you a piece of paper, promising to pay you back, maybe, someday, if the Republic survives its next budget crisis.
The whole economy running on IOUs and faith.
Pretty much. Debt and paper promises, backed by a government that might collapse next year. It's not exactly a recipe for civic morale.
And speaking of land and promises, this financial vacuum, it just fueled corruption, didn't it? Land fraud, right away, tainting the Republic's legitimacy from the start.
That's one of the darkest ironies here. They fought against the perceived corruption of Mexico's central government.
Only to face homegrown scandals immediately, and on a breathtaking scale.
The sheer greed and speculation you read about in the sources is really astonishing. The Constitution of the Republic itself, the one adopted in March 1836,
it
had to include specific language. damning language, declaring huge, obviously fraudulent land sales absolutely null and void.
They had to write anti-corruption clauses into their founding document just to undo scams that were already happening.
Precisely. The most notorious case, 400 leagues of land granted to associates of a guy named John T. Mason.
400 leagues, how much is that?
A league in Texas was huge, over 4,400 acres. So 400 leagues. You're talking millions of acres.
Millions.
Yeah, a literal nation-sized chunk of real estate that was almost stolen from the people before the republic could even, stand on its own feet.
Wow, and it wasn't just outsiders trying to cash in.
Oh no, insiders too. A superior judge, Thomas J. Chambers, a political player. He managed to get 30 leagues of land for himself.
30 leagues is still enormous.
Exactly. It just underscores that victory didn't magically create this golden age of civic virtue. If anything, the political instability, the chaos of the consultation, those intriguing caucusing parties Governor Smith complained about, that chaos created the perfect environment for this kind of corruption to bloom. Instantly, right as the state was founded.
Okay, so political chaos, check. Financial ruin, check. Massive internal fraud, check. But the external threats didn't just disappear with Santa Anna's capture, right?
Not at all. The Republic still faced constant deadly opposition. Not just the lingering threat from Mexico, but from hostile indigenous groups, especially the Lupin and Comanche on the frontier.
That struggle never stopped.
Relentless and deadly.
Yeah.
Actually, the civil strife with Mexico, it made the Indian problem worse.
Ah.
Because all the national troops, such as they were focused on the conflict with Santa Anna's forces. It left the huge frontier basically exposed, defenseless.
And the Comanche knew this.
Oh, absolutely. Powerful groups like the Comanche understood the Texans were preoccupied. They saw an opportunity and took full advantage, pushing hard against the settlements, sometimes aiming for, total extermination of those settlements.
The sources paint a really harrowing picture of just constant terror out there.
They do. Even long before the Revolution, going back to 1821, the records show 97 citizens murdered by indigenous groups just in the areas around Bexar, Goliad, and Gonzales. And that number doesn't even count military losses.
And after the Revolution,
the attacks continued, unabated.
There are specific examples in the accounts, aren't there? Tragic ones.
Yeah, they really reveal the state of constant anxiety that just defined life if you weren't in one of the main towns. Think about John Hibbins, killed just below Gonzales, his wife and children captured. Or Elizabeth Coleman, Robert M. Coleman's wife, killed by Indians near Weberville. These weren't just, isolated border skirmishes.
No, these were strategic raids.
Exactly. Designed to destabilize the frontier, to push the settlers back.
The fear must have been overwhelming.
So pervasive that families often felt they had no choice. Abandoned their homes, abandoned their crops, gathered together for safety in fortified towns like Bastrop.
So the fight for survival on the frontier against these raiding parties, it was just as critical to the Republic's existence as the big battles against Mexico.
Absolutely. It consumed resources, attention, lives. The new nation essentially traded one big military threat, Mexico, for hundreds of small, constant, deadly threats that plagued them for decades.
Okay, so we've laid out the huge challenges the new nation faced immediately. Financial ruin, political infighting, constant frontier warfare.
A tough start.
Definitely. Now let's turn to the individuals. The men who really defined this whole conflict. San Jacinto was a high point for them, maybe the high point for some.
For sure.
But it was just one moment. Their stories continued, often in tumultuous ways, long after 1836.
And we have to start with Sam Houston, the hero of the hour, the man who somehow held the army together during that terrifying retreat, the runaway scrape.
And then delivered that knockout blow at San Jacinto. He was the leader, no question.
The immediate, undisputed leader of the army,
And his political rise really mirrored his military command. He was unanimously elected commander-in-chief by the convention, March 4th, 1836.
But he wasn't new to politics even then.
No, he'd already been involved. He chaired the committee drafting the Constitution for the proposed state of Texas back in 1833.
So he was foundational, both militarily and politically.
Yeah. The sources also give us a glimpse of the immense pressure he was under during that retreat before San Jacinto. His leadership style, it was firm, maybe even autocratic, driven by sheer necessity.
There's that really vivid story, isn't there, from the young soldier, John Holland Jenkins?
Right. Jenkins apparently really admired Houston. But during the retreat, Jenkins was riding ahead of the main army on a spirited horse. shaying off a bit, perhaps.
And Houston saw him.
And Houston's reaction wasn't exactly gentle guidance. He apparently just exploded. A harsh reprimand, swearing, cursing at Jenkins for riding too fast, for getting out of line.
Jenkins was completely shocked. The passionate harshness and curse, as he put it, from the man he idolized. He got off his horse instantly, said he'd rather die than ride another step.
It's a striking anecdote. What does it tell us?
Well, it highlights something critical about leadership in that kind of extreme situation, doesn't it? It was just necessary discipline. During the runaway scrape, panic could have destroyed the whole army.
True. Absolute control was needed.
Or does it show a darker side? Uncompromising, almost autocratic. Houston demanded obedience, total obedience, and that iron will, it served him incredibly well in the war.
And later on, too, right, in building the nation.
Absolutely. That firmness carried right over into his priorities after the victory. Houston's long-term influence, you see it immediately focusing on securing the frontier.
He knew the Indian threat was a crisis.
A constant national security crisis. Made worse, as we said, by the previous Mexican government's failures. It was Houston who commissioned the first proper, regularly organized company of Texas Rangers under Colonel Jack Hayes.
Jack Hayes. Legendary figure himself.
Became one, yeah. And Hayes' company, they were tasked with protecting a huge stretch of the frontier, Corpus Christi, all the way inland to the Nueces River.
Houston understood something fundamental there.
He understood that securing the land against Comanche and Lipan raids was the only way to establish real control, attract settlers, and ultimately get the economic stability the Republic desperately needed. It was foundational.
Okay. Now, let's shift gears to the defeated leader, Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna.
Santa Anna.
Captured, eventually exiled from Texas, but his story definitely doesn't end at San Jacinto. His career, it's almost unbelievable, this constant pursuit of absolute power.
He was the ultimate political chameleon. Truly remarkable. In 1832, he's pronouncing against the usurper Bustamante, claiming to support federalism.
Right, the 1824 Constitution.
Exactly. Then, incredibly, by 1833, he becomes president himself. And what does he do? He immediately retires to his hacienda.
To do what? Plan his next move?
To perfect his schemes for a dictatorship. He repeatedly abandoned the very federal constitution that the Texans were fighting to restore. He flipped back and forth whenever it suited his ambition.
And the sources are clear. His actions against Texas, banning immigration, setting up military garrisons, Texans saw that for what it was.
A deadly thrust at the heart of Texas. That's how it was described. Not just bureaucratic meddling. He was the embodiment of the centralist despotism they were fighting against.
But even after being defeated and captured in Texas, he doesn't just fade away.
Not even close. He remained this incredibly potent, disruptive force in Mexican politics for decades. It's kind of mind-boggling.
There's that interesting note from Stephen F. Austin's diary, right? Written while Austin was his prisoner.
Yeah, that's deeply illuminating. Austin wrote that he believes Santa Anna would ultimately be supported by all political parties in Mexico to maintain the federal system.
Which seems completely backwards, given Santa Anna's actions.
It does. Now, was Austin just saying what he thought his captor wanted to hear? Or maybe what he hoped was true?
Or maybe just trying to make sense of the chaos.
It was likely heavily influenced by his status as a prisoner, sure. But it really demonstrates the incredibly complex, chaotic nature of Mexican politics at that time. Santa Anna, despite his failure in Texas, could somehow keep commanding allegiance, or at least attention and fear, for decades.
And for Texas.
For Texas, his enduring power meant he remained the symbol of Mexican hostility, a constant reminder that the threat hadn't really gone away long after he physically left the region.
Okay. And finally, Stephen F. Austin, the father of Texas, his life after the revolution.
It's really a story of sacrifice, isn't it? Ultimately costing him everything. It really is tragic. Austin's dedication started with peaceful settlement, trying to work within the Mexican system. But that dedication cost him dearly. His health, his freedom, years before the war even finished.
Because of his letters, right, his political correspondence.
Exactly. Advocating for stability, yes, but seen as subversive. He was arrested in Monterrey in 1834, thrown into a dungeon. The dungeon of the Inquisition in Mexico City.
We have to pause on that. Imprisoned in this notorious ancient place, subject to the whims of whoever was in power in Mexico City at the moment.
His health was just broken by it, permanently. Years of suffering. And he only gets back to Texas just as the war is really heating up.
Yet even after all that, he's still working for stability.
His commitment was unwavering. He ran for governor in November 1835. He advocated a more cautious path, but lost to Henry Smith, who was pushing harder for independence.
And his last big contribution.
Named right after San Jacinto. He was appointed, along with Archer and Wharton, as one of those critical commissioners to the United States.
Back into the fray immediately.
Threw himself into it, labored passionately, traveling constantly through the states, trying to get help, trying to get recognition for the new republic.
And that final effort.
It seems to have been the final straw. That strenuous, taxing work coming right after his long imprisonment during a time of intense national crisis and personal hardship.
Yeah.
It just took its toll.
He died so soon after the victory.
Tragically sudden. Pneumonia. Just months after the revolution ended, his active role was over. His death really cemented his legacy, didn't it? The man who literally sacrificed his health, his freedom, and ultimately his life for the nation he'd spent his whole life trying to build.
So looking back over this whole deep dive, the Texas Revolution, it was incredible, really. Short, brutal, ending with that dramatic win at San Jacinto.
Decisive.
But that victory, it wasn't an ending. It was just the start of the real fight. It created a new nation, yes, but it also set the stage for decades of conflict, shaped the future of North America.
Directly leading to the U.S. annexing Texas and then the Mexican-American War. Its consequences were huge.
The revolution didn't stop on the battlefield. It just shifted, transitioned immediately into this incredibly hard struggle to build something lasting. Law, order, stability, against overwhelming forces.
Crippling debt, as we discussed, rampant land fraud from within, and that relentless, grinding conflict with indigenous groups on the frontier. The fight changed from battling an army to battling systemic instability.
And what really stands out, I think, is how the key figures, Houston, the surviving hero, Austin, the advocate who gave everything, even Santa Anna, defeated but still looming.
Yeah.
They were just immediately sucked right back into the huge, difficult political and military machinery they'd helped create. Their personal stories became inseparable from the fate of Texas and Mexico, too.
The victory didn't solve the problems, did it? It just exchanged one set of massive challenges for another, which forces you to ask a really fundamental question about what revolutionary success even looks like.
Right. The Texans fought partly against what they saw as a corrupt, unstable Mexican government, one that failed to protect their rights, their property. So, considering the immediate aftermath, the intense political infighting in their own government, the chaos of the consultation, the catastrophic finances, the land grabs, we have to ask you, the listener, was the price of freedom worth it in terms of the stability they actually achieved right away?
Or did winning just mean trading one set of overwhelming problems for a completely different, maybe equally overwhelming set? Does it show that maybe political instability is just inherent in trying to birth any new nation?
It's a powerful question, isn't it? Could the political virtue they were fighting for actually survive the ugly, pragmatic realities of just achieving sovereignty, let alone maintaining it?
Something to definitely think about.
Well, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the difficult, costly, and ultimately defining epilogue of the Texas Revolution. We hope you found it insightful.
We'll see you next time.